some fun.
Oh yeah,
So
I'm just relaxing.
awesome. Awesome. Well, it's great to have you here, Ruth. This is Christina Simmons, host of the podcast Say Yes to Holiness. And I am here with Ruth Pierce. And I'm so excited to be able to have conversation with you and to follow up, especially on from the time that you were on the Say Yes Summit discussion panel. And in a particular way, I wanted people to get to know you so that they could really know what it is that you're about, what you're passionate about, and excited to have that chance today. So, Ruth, go ahead and just introduce yourself a little bit about your life and where you are,
Okay.
which is important in our COVID world right now.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you so much for having me on. And I just love your Say Yes to Holiness. The whole concept of it is just wonderful. I am Ruth
Thank
Pierce.
you.
I'm Ruth Pierce, and I live in Kansas. And we live on a little lake, and I tell you that because it is kind of fun. In fact, we've got family out there today. We'll go out and play here in a little bit. But my background is that I am a former math teacher, and then I went into HR, and now I love coaching people. And the overall intersection of all those different careers that I had, and yes, they're 3 separate careers, but it's developing people. And that's my sweet spot. And I will use anything I can to help you find your potential and your passions and your priority.
Yeah. And so as you've been helping people do exactly this to achieve their potential, you talk about a life resume, and a lot of people, not quite sure what that might be. Could you share a little bit about how that's different than a traditional resume?
Sure. And I write professional resumes. It's one thing I've been doing since I left my HR career, because it just was a automatic follow through. And my sweet spot in telling or writing somebody's professional resume is pulling out their professional story. And the more I saw that happening, the more I thought, why don't we use this same vehicle and bring it into the whole person? Because our life outside of our careers affects who we are in our career. We pull that in. As much as we like to say, no, they're separate, they're not. So let's take that concept, and we call it the total life resume. And it's time to fly, because Time to Fly comes from a book I wrote several years ago. So it's time to fly because it's going to get you soaring in your relationships and your career. But it's going to be your whole life. And we're going to look at such things, or what we do is we look at, what strengths do you have in your career? Or what do you bring to the work environment? And then also we go outside of that and say, what great friendship attributes do you bring to your friends? And what ones would your friends say that you bring to them? Because a lot of times we don't realize what we're bringing.
Yeah.
We're going to look at, we're going to look at major life events. And I say events, it can be milestones and it can be both. But what are some events that have shaped you? Like for me, is it okay if I share a little bit about me?
Oh, please, because how we got to doing what we're doing, that the story, it's so important.
Yeah. I'm a middle child. And I grew up in a stable home. I really honestly did. But I think that being a middle child, even subconsciously, affected how much I'm a people pleaser. And being aware of that, just that little dynamic makes a difference. And I've had major life events that have shaped me too. I'm a breast cancer survivor. And yes, it's a long time ago. We're coming up to 30 years ago.
Wow.
But did that shape who I am going forward? Yeah, it did. It did positively, probably more than negatively, because it gave me a gratitude for life. Yes, when those major birthdays come around, those ones that have a 0 in the end, we celebrate them because we realize we might not have been here. And It's all there. My mom was killed in a car accident. And yeah, I still grieve her. We just had an anniversary and yeah, I grieved it. But what did I see going forward that would come out of that?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things that we do with that. And
So,
well,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so it sounds like what you do with a life resume is that you really bring about a clarity and focus, as well as an integrating activity for someone to see themselves as a whole person, all
Yes.
aspects of who they are. And then when we gain that clarity, we tend to be able to sell ourselves or be able to identify those opportunities where we should be,
Oh, yeah,
rather than chasing after something where someone goes, "Hey, you might be good at this." Have you found that to be the case with people that you have worked with?
absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
the more we learn about ourselves, we radiate a self-confidence
Mm-hmm.
that pulls those opportunities towards us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If we don't know ourselves, then when an opportunity comes up, we mentally say, I can't do it.
Right.
We don't think we're good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big piece of that. Our mental, like we were talking about on the discussion, what goes on up here is so huge
Mm-hmm.
and it
Yeah.
affects how we do. So that self-confidence that comes out is awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely about mindset, having the mind, body, soul aligned.
Yes.
Um, in my own ministry, I talk about putting first things first, but I think you call it something a little bit different. You work on course. What's that about?
Oh, yeah. Uh, we've always heard that you've got to have a strong physical core,
Mm-hmm.
and we know what that means and we know how to do it. But it's just as important to have a strong mental, emotional, and spiritual core.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they all affect each other, and all four of them do. The physical
Mm-hmm.
goes in there. Now, because there's so many people focusing on the physical core, I don't go into that world. There's a lot better other people to help you do that. So my
Mm-hmm.
focus is that integration of the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
and how those, getting those stronger is going to affect how you view life and how others view you.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen that they scaffold upon each other in a particular way? Um,
Um,
okay. All right.
I mean,
Um,
some people would say the spiritual does, and I do think the
mm,
spiritual is a very important part.
mhm,
Um, but I do, when I look at it, I see that they all will have positive and negative on each other.
mhm. Yeah. So the reason I was asking is just within the Catholic world, we talk about holistic formation and it having that human aspect, the spiritual, the intellectual, and then the pastoral, which is your doing. How do you go
Mhm.
out and serve? And so what you're speaking of, this integration, it sounds very similar. Is that we have to be attentive to all of those in order to find that confidence that and radiate that
Sure.
out that clarity, and then do you have people who use their life resume, to go out and apply for jobs, or do you help them take that and then like tool it into different for different different things?
As your life resume, your total life resume is totally just for you. Now,
Okay.
I would encourage you to share it with somebody close to you, like a spouse or sister, parents, whoever you're close to, just to help them understand you. And then
Mm-hmm.
have them even look at it and say, is this me?
Mm-hmm.
Because they'll see different stuff. And your total life resume is always going to be changing.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to be set in stone and you say, I did this. It never looked at again. Just like your professional resume is never left and you say, I don't have to look at it again. Because
Right.
we're always growing, we're always changing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it will help you as far as doing a professional resume because that story is still there. and you can pull that part out and look at it. But no, I would never give a total life resume to a potential employer.
Right. So how do you think understanding, because you keep talking about knowledge of ourselves, and how do you think that understanding helps people perhaps adjust or change their priorities?
Oh, I could go a couple different directions with this. We'll go one,
Go
then
for
we'll go
it.
the other
You can
way.
go either way or both.
One of the first things that you have to do when you get ready to take this in-depth dive to yourself is you've got to give yourself permission to be yourself.
Mm.
And so many of us have not taken the opportunity to do that. We don't think we can. I was a bona fide people pleaser. Honestly, I was. And I had hidden myself so well that I didn't know myself. And I can still remember the instance when I was I really was trying to do what somebody else was wanting to do, and it was really hurting me, and I was still trying to hide it. And I had a friend that looked me in the eye, and she finally drug out what was going on, and she validated my feelings. And when she did that, it gave me permission to be myself. And then I could take it from there. And I gradually started pulling off the layers. And that was over 20 years ago, but it still is very much with me. So that's one thing. Honestly, that's the first thing we do with the Total Life Resume. Is we give you permission to be you. And then we give you permission to find out about you. And then you can do that, and you can start digging, and you can find out. You can do it by reading books. You can take assessments. I just found out a new assessment this week that I'm going to do. So I keep learning about myself all the time. It's a never-ending thing. I love assessments because they tell us what all we want to do. Now, I want to go a different direction, if that's okay with that question.
No, please. No, I'd love
Because you
to.
talked about identities, and we all have identities. We have identity on who we are, who we're related to, what our job is, all those type things. We have identities as a daughter or son, or as a mom or dad, brother, sister, and men, but women too anymore have a lot of identity with their career, and they want to be successful in that career. But a concept that's coming clearer and clearer to me all the time is the relationship between your identity and then your priorities. Because your priorities will always be ranked in the same order that your identities are. And they may not be aligned the way you think you want them, but they will be aligned the way they are.
Right.
Now, Brandon, go ahead.
No, please.
We all have to spend 40, 50 hours at work sometimes, but make sure that's a priority for you.
No, absolutely. And I think in the work that I do, I do one-on-one mentorship, and then also small group coaching. And it's always about, putting first things first. And how do we go and do that? Well, as you just said, we have to identify what are the real priorities in our life. So it's that what we think they are. And, so it's about arousing awareness. And how do we raise our awareness? It's through books, through assessments, through conversations with someone who's been on the journey and understands and can help tease it out, like this good friend of yours did for you. And I can validate completely the value of having a mentor, a coach, somebody who's able to be present to you and be able to give you that outside perspective. So I have the greatest respect for what you do, because you create that safe place that we all need. And, we can't transform unless we have that safe place. So we're afraid to be our real selves because we're afraid we might get hurt, or, it's going to be rejected, or all these different things. And so it sounds like the life resume is really about, personal coaching done in the context of being able to help you identify those gifts and those strengths,
Mhm. Mhm.
and be able to give you that clarity so that that way you can make sure that you're living the life that you say you want to live. Is that about right?
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly. It
okay.
sounds a lot like what you're doing with your coaching too, Christina.
Mm.
You're helping them figure out those first things first and all of that that goes with it, that say yes to holiness.
Mm-hmm. And for me, of course, it's rooted in our identity as sons and daughters of God. And so I joke with people about the fact that, when I went to college, I was, I knew I wanted to major in history. And then I also was thinking I wanted to major in philosophy because I love ideas. I love, to
Mhm.
wrestle with those things. But I eventually went and majored in theology. And the main reason I joke with people, the simple explanation is because in philosophy, there was no certainty. Everything was always up for debate. So it's kind of like, you know, are we really here? Is there a God? Is there, and it was just like everything was up for a debate. So it was always the premise of any conversation or discussion you'd have would be, okay, this is our premise, and now we'll debate from there. And so I joke with people about that I majored in theology because there is a guaranteed premise. There is a God, then everything else we can debate.
Yeah.
For me, what I have found is exactly what you're saying, is that our identity shapes exactly what our world, our lives are. And it makes me wonder, I mean, just kind of when you look around at the generation right now, particularly our young adults, there's such a crisis of identity that is
Yes.
going on
Yes.
in our world. And really believe that what you are doing is such a valuable offering for people, because so many people never are self-reflective. They never spend the time looking at their lives. So like, what would you say to somebody who'd be like, I've never accomplished anything, I've never done anything major, there's nothing there. What would you encourage, or kind of talk to them about if they're kind of going, nah, life resume, I don't know how that would help me.
Yeah, I would say let's talk because I can guarantee there's a lot more potential in you than you realize.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more potential and there's a lot more passion. So let's find that and then intersect it with your priorities.
Mm.
It's really, really difficult to see where we're good at. It's often
Mm-hmm.
somebody else can see it in us. We're
Mm-hmm.
blind to it.
Right.
Like with working with the professional resumes, I'll say, I'll help you tell your story because it's really hard to tell your own. And you can hear that sigh on the back end of that. You're
Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we struggle with when we're trying to write even a professional resume.
Mm-hmm.
How to promote myself or see what I'm really good at. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the same with our life. So let somebody else in and let them help you.
Mm. Beautiful. Um, I am a huge proponent of story.
Oh,
In fact,
yeah.
one of the aspects of my book, that is the fact that we have to tell our story. Otherwise, I liken it, of course, to the divine life, that is within each of us. And when we don't share our story, we're literally strangling the life that's within us, because
Mm.
all story is to be told.
Oh, yeah.
And whenever we think that our story isn't worthy of being told, what we're doing is we're actually killing ourselves. We actually are, I
Mhm.
use the visual of, you might as well be taking a noose, put it around and pulling it, is
Mhm.
because that's the equivalent, is you're denying your identity, you're denying yourself, and you're denying the great contribution that you can give to the world. And as you said, so often though, we can't see it. So to have the great gift of someone who can help us, as you described your friend, tease it out and help you be able to uncover it, is absolutely wonderful. So you made mention of your friend. I always have to go and ask, in your work and in your life, who or what, books, movies, music, people, whatever, have had significant influences upon you, that they've shaped you, or they've kind of helped you pivot in a different direction, or one that you didn't see yourself going in?
Very good question. I've had a lot of mentors. Like I say, once I
Mm,
gave myself permission to be me, I didn't have strong people in my world that thought this way.
mm-hmm,
Now, my friend that I mentioned before, her name is Martha, and yes, she did. And she helped me tremendously in the first part of that era to move forward, both professionally and personally. She ended
mm-hmm,
up being my boss, by the way. So, and she's the one that got me into HR and then into HR management. But I would read books and I would do online coaching. Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend, they're Christian psychologists. They were very instrumental in those early years of teaching me
mm,
boundaries and knowing what was
okay.
happening there.
Mm-hmm,
Carrie Overbrunner, which is a mutual friend of both of ours, he has some
mm-hmm,
good books called Your Secret Name, where it helps you to
mm-hmm,
realize your potential and things like that. Were very instrumental in my life in the early years too.
mm-hmm.
And then just different assessments, different mentors that have come in that have helped me to think outside the box and taken me to a new level. They've
Mm-hmm.
all been good.
Mm. So it must be, since I know that you're getting to work with Carrie a little bit more closely. Is that kind of a little bit of a dream come true for you?
Yes and no. I mean, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's been good. He keeps stretching me a little bit more each time, but yeah,
That's what coaches are supposed to do.
sure.
And so, but I find that fascinating. So in the those are your influences. I can see in your kind of your personal, uh, um, you know, in the business side, I guess I would say. In your personal life, what has inspired you or encouraged you, especially, you shared, you've gone through some very difficult times. What has inspired or encouraged you to help you persevere?
I think it is my foundation with my spiritual life. It's my foundation of knowing that God's ultimately in control. And he's taught me and he's still stretching me big time right now. He's
Mm-hmm.
taking me on a spiritual plane to a new level.
Mm,
But let me share just a little bit about, and this, like I say, this was 25, 30 years ago when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And after I went through treatment and everything else, then God and I had to have it out because
mm-hmm.
I basically said, why did you allow this to happen to me?
Right.
And I grew up in a very spiritual home. So church and all of that type stuff has always been a strong part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to, I want to say we duked it out, but I don't know if you duke things out with God or not, but it took me about,
Jacob wrestled. Jacob
Jacob
wrestled.
Breakfast. I imagine it took me about a year till I got to the place. Yet, yes, God, you're sovereign. And yes, you had this happen to me. And now when I look back at it, because I'm a survivor of so many years, I have to look at it differently and say, why did I survive and somebody else didn't? And
Mm-hmm.
so it kind of flipped for me. But that
Mm-hmm.
sovereignty of God was still there.
Mm-hmm.
So when the accident happened with my mom, yeah, it was tough and we grieved and we're still grieving. I'm not going to deny that. But I had to learn that lesson again, but it was a
Mm,
lot shorter time frame.
I
It was
gotcha.
like, okay, I don't know how long, but it was just weeks or months before, or maybe even quicker. I can remember when I left my dad probably a week after everything came about, we looked at each other and I just said, I don't know how God's going to use this, but he's going to use it. He's going to use it for positive in each one of our lives.
Right.
And my dad was such a strength through the whole thing, because he says, we prayed before we went on that trip, and this is what God had planned.
What a beautiful witness for you and for the family.
Yeah, it was a rock that we could stand on.
Wonderful. But it sounds like my experience has been that when sometimes if I'm not paying attention to the lessons that God wants to share with me, is that he'll pull out a 2x4 and hit me upside the head. So it sounds like there was a 2x4, and then this time he just needed to pull out a small stick for you to help you kind of remember. Yeah. It's amazing how God will do that in our lives. But it always comes back to story, is that those are key moments in your story that have dramatically, I'd say, impacted your work today and helping others be able to discover themselves. Would that be an accurate statement? Or
I do think so. I mean, without it could have been something else, but yes. God uses our pain to help somebody else. He never wastes pain. As long as we're willing to process it and move forward, then he is never going to waste pain. And that's one reason on that Total Life resume, that we look at the events, and the event itself could be very negative. But let's look at it through that lens, but also through other lenses, and say, how can I process this and use that pain or that situation to go in a positive direction?
It sounds like you have really developed a phenomenal tool for people to be able to really come to self-knowledge. So many people are seeking out there. And so I really hope that, this podcast is going to help get that message out there. So I guess a question I would have, for you is, knowing what you know now, what are some words of wisdom that you would have loved for your younger self to have at least heard, not necessarily would have listened to, paid attention to, but at least would have heard at some point? What is it that you would have shared with yourself?
You are worthy. You are loved by God, your creator. That's the first one. The second one is, you have enough, and you are enough. Couldn't think of my verb there. You are enough, and you have enough. Now, granted, you may not have what you need to be the professional basketball players. Very few of us do. But you do have enough, and you are enough for what God has planned for you. And you have more potential than you ever realized you have.
Yeah.
Believe in yourself. Believe you are important, and find out who that person is. Find somebody that's going to help you. Because if you're trying to do it on your own, then you're going to get mired back down in that negative mental mindset again. So I don't care if it's friends. I don't care whether it's family. Ideally a coach, but if you've got the other there that will work with you on it, find somebody that's going to help you find your potential and your passions, because we all have passions. And the more we can work within those passions, the better it's going to be. God has planned each one of us to develop who we really are, and then to use those gifts to serve others. And that's not being selfish. To find out who you are, that's not being selfish, because you're going to use it to help others.
Yeah, it brings up a quote to my mind that was you find your vocation, your mission, where the world's greatest needs and your passions cross.
Yes. Yes.
And uh, that's so important. Those desires, those passions, they're directing us or guiding us towards where it is we're supposed to be. And then if we respond, especially out of love, to the need that we see around us, that's when we find exactly where we're supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, part of why I wanted to reach out, as part of the Say Yes to Holiness podcast, to you, was because a key component is to come to know ourselves, to be able to know our identity, to be able to embrace it, to be able to go and to find that sweet spot, but to find that intersection of where our passions, our gifts, our talents, who it is that God created us to be, and where the need is and where they cross, and to go out and to do that. And as I said, the work that you're doing is a key component to coming to know ourselves that way. And so that's why I like to reach out to people and talk to them about what they're doing, because there's not a one way to do anything. And so how I necessarily speak or say about something will resonate with one person and not with another. But there's all a core, there's all commonalities, and the commonalities are to come to know ourselves, our identities, and that way we can then put together our priorities, and being able to live out that life well lived. And I guess that would be, gosh, I can't believe that our time is already starting to, man, time flies. But if you were to give words of, would your words of wisdom to your younger self be any different than what you would encourage people who would be coming to work with you, for why they should come and work with you? Is there anything else that you would want to add for people who are going, I don't know if I want a coach or I need a coach, or what would you say to them at this point?
I do think that one of the things that we haven't really focused on is how this is going to affect your relationships.
There we go. There we go.
Because the more you know yourself and the more you can take the mask off, then the more authentic you're going to show up in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened with me, is all my key relationships started changing because I showed up differently. I didn't show up as a people pleaser. I showed up with, yes, I don't want to run over you, but I don't want to be run over. So let's talk about what we both need out of this and figure out how we can get both of our needs met. It was a lot more transparent, a lot more authentic. And that made a huge difference. It made a big difference in many ways, but one of the ways that comes to my mind is I wasn't harboring the hurts that so many of us do when we're in a relationship of any type. I'm not just talking spouses and girlfriends and boyfriends.
Right.
I'm talking family relationships or whatever, friendships. Then you can be yourself. It's that giving yourself permission to be you again. It keeps going back to that.
No. To have that authenticity,
Yes.
and to have the freedom to be authentic is even more so. And so you made mention of knowledge of yourself. So what else have you seen have been differences or changes for people that you've worked with after they go through doing this life resume? You made mention about for themselves, being able to embrace who they are, but then also about relationships. How else have you seen this transform or change people's lives?
They just become a whole person in so many ways. I've seen their careers take off. Now, sometimes it helps them realize that the career they're in is a dead end and it's not what they want. and they felt
Mm-hmm.
stuck there. But it
Right.
opens their eyes to new possibilities.
Mm.
And like I say, not all of us can do everything. Like the
Mm-hmm.
athlete, like we said, not all of us can be those professional athletes. That's a one that's a pretty
Right.
obvious one. So that's why I keep bringing it up. But the things that I've done, if you would have told me 30 years ago that, yeah, Ruth, you're going to be doing that, I would have said, I don't think so. I'm just going to sit over here in this corner and I'm not going to talk. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing it because it's my potential that I didn't realize I had. And I would want
Mm-hmm.
you guys, the people that are listening, to find that potential that's that hidden seed inside you that you don't even know enough to open it up.
Mm. Beautiful. Kind of like having a Christmas gift under the tree that kind of got like shuffled in the back and you didn't know it
Yes.
was there, and you
Yes.
find it and then you're able to go, oh, look, extra gift.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
No.
it'll take a while for it to develop into something. Most of these
Mm,
potentials don't just pop out and, oh yeah, we're ready to go run the marathon.
right.
It's there and it can grow.
Mm. It sounds like, Ruth, that if somebody wants to change the world around them, that the opportunity to be able to discover their true identity, step into their authentic selves, does transform the world around them. It reminds me of Mother Teresa of Calcutta's phrase about, you want to change the world around us, become the change you wish to see.
Yeah.
So by us embracing who we truly are, then the change that we're desiring will come about. And so to have the opportunity, and the most powerful way, of course, is in the sharing of our story, of who we truly are. And so again, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have the conversation, but especially to be able to make people aware of the great work that you're doing to help people come to a greater understanding of themselves, so that that way they can go and they can truly transform the world. And that's what we're always about. So
Yes.
it's
You and I both. Yep. You're doing a great job too there. You really are.
Uh, I would be remiss if I did not ask, how can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
My website is my name, ruthpierce.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then an email is just ruth@ruthpierce.com. And yes, I would love to connect with people. I would love to get your story out of you. And let's get you moving on in your relationships and your careers.
Wonderful, most wonderful. And for those of you who were part of the summit, um, Ruth provided as a free tool for you to kind of get started on that. And that's something that is available for everybody who participated in the summit. If you haven't already got it in an email, and then it's definitely a downloadable in our premium pass section, so you're able to get access to it, so you can get that free tool and use it. And I hope that you do, because it definitely is illuminating and transformative. So, but thank you, Ruth, so much for your time. It's been great joy to spend time with you and conversation. And it definitely, I think, is a part of my tagline per se, which is to keep doing whatever it takes in order to be able to tell the master of death night today, in the pursuit of holiness. And that's why it's say yes to holiness and then do whatever it takes. So thank you for adding to that conversation. And I look forward to more in the future.
Very much. And thanks for having me on, Christine. I enjoyed it so much.
Uh, God bless, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.